Welcome back, Midnight Stories family. Get ready for another heart-touching tale. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Now let's dive into today's story. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting striped shadows across the granite countertop where Ethan Carter stood preparing his coffee. Steam rose from the dark liquid as he added a splash of cream, his wedding ring catching the light as he stirred. The house held that particular kind of silence that came with early mornings, a silence that used to feel comfortable but lately seemed to hold an edge of something else. He glanced at the clock. 7:15 a.m. In the 10 years of their marriage, he'd learned to read the rhythm of their mornings like a well-worn book. Sophie Carter would be up soon, rushing through her morning routine with the nervous energy that had become her constant companion these past few months. Right on cue, he heard the soft pad of feet upstairs, followed by the familiar creak of their bedroom door. But the routine had shifted lately, subtle changes that nagged at him like a splinter under his skin. The shower ran longer than it used to. Her morning routine had expanded to include extra time for makeup, for choosing outfits with a care she hadn't shown in years. Ethan took his coffee to the breakfast nook, opening his laptop to check his emails. The architecture firm where he worked as a senior partner had a major project presentation next week, but his mind kept wandering from the blueprints on his screen to the changes in his home life. The sound of heels clicking against hardwood announced Sophie's descent. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, perfectly put together in a navy pencil skirt and cream blouse. Her dark hair fell in careful waves past her shoulders, styled, he noticed, the way she used to do for their date nights before they'd stopped having those. "Morning," Ethan offered, watching as she moved straight to the coffee maker, her phone already in hand. "Oh, morning," she replied, distracted by whatever was on her screen. Her fingers moved rapidly across the surface, typing out a message. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth, the kind of smile he rarely saw directed at him anymore. "Want breakfast?" "I could make eggs," Ethan suggested, remembering weekend mornings when they cooked together, planning their day over fresh coffee and shared sections of the newspaper. "No time," Sophie said, grabbing a travel mug from the cabinet and filling it quickly. "Big presentation today. The Hanover account needs final revisions before the client meeting." Ethan nodded, noting how she still hadn't made eye contact. "Another late night, then?" "Probably." She dropped a tea bag into her travel mug, something else that had changed. She'd switched from coffee to green tea 3 weeks ago, claiming it was better for her skin. "Don't wait up for dinner. I'll grab something at the office." "I could bring you lunch," he suggested, testing the waters. "That new Thai place open near your office." Finally, she looked at him, but her eyes skated away too quickly. "Oh, that's sweet, but I've got a working lunch with the team. Maybe another time." Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. The smile that crossed her face was immediate, unconscious, and felt like a punch to his gut. She turned slightly, angling the screen away from his view as she typed a response. "I should go. Don't want to hit traffic." Sophie grabbed her purse from the counter, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. She reapplied her lipstick, MAC Ruby Woo, he remembered buying it for her last Christmas, and fluffed her hair. "Have a good day." The door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden emptiness of the house. Ethan sat there, his coffee growing cold, and tried to pinpoint exactly when things had started to change. It hadn't been sudden, like erosion wearing away at a coastline. The shift had been gradual enough that he'd almost missed it. Almost. But there were moments, crystal clear in hindsight, that should have warned him. The password on her phone changing for the first time in years, the new clothes appearing in her closet, tags removed before he could see the prices, private calls taken in another room, her voice too low to make out the words. Each detail on its own might mean nothing, but together they formed a pattern he couldn't ignore. At work that day, Ethan found himself distracted. The blueprints for the Harrison project blurred before his eyes as his mind replayed morning after morning of similar scenes. Earth to Ethan. Matt, his friend and fellow architect, waved a hand in front of his face. "You okay, man? You've been staring at that same section for 20 minutes? Ethan blinked, forcing himself to focus. "Yeah, just thinking about the support beam placement." Matt leaned against his desk, lowering his voice. "Sure it's not about something else? You've been quiet lately." "It's nothing." Ethan straightened the papers on his desk, a habit when he needed to organize his thoughts. "Just some stuff at home. I need to figure out," Ethan said, avoiding Matt's questioning eyes. "Trouble in paradise?" Matt asked, then held up his hands at Ethan's sharp look. "None of my business. Just remember, I'm here if you need to talk." Ethan nodded, grateful for the offer but knowing he wasn't ready to voice his suspicions. Speaking them aloud would make them real, and he needed more information first. The day dragged on, each hour marked by the temptation to drive by Sophie's office to verify her working lunch story. He resisted, throwing himself into work instead. By 6 o'clock, he'd made more progress on the Harrison project than he had all week, fueled by a need to keep his mind occupied. Driving home, he decided to make dinner anyway. They used to enjoy cooking together, and even if she came home late, he could at least try to maintain some normalcy. He stopped at the grocery store, selecting ingredients for her favorite, chicken marsala. The house felt different when he walked in, emptier somehow, despite the fact that Sophie was rarely home this early anyway. He moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, the routine of cooking offering a temporary distraction from his thoughts. The chicken was just coming out of the oven when he heard her key in the lock earlier than expected. His heart rate picked up as he listened to her heels on the hardwood, noting how she paused, probably checking her appearance in the hallway mirror again. "Something smells amazing," Sophie said as she entered the kitchen. Her cheeks were flushed, hair slightly disheveled in a way that might be from the wind, might be from something else. She set her purse down, and Ethan noticed how she angled her body to keep it close. "Thought we could eat together for a change," he said, keeping his voice casual as he plated the food. "How was the presentation?" "Oh, it went well." She swept her hair back from her face, a nervous gesture he recognized. "The client loved our initial concepts. We're moving forward with the full proposal." Ethan nodded, setting their plates on the dining room table. He'd opened a bottle of red wine earlier, letting it breathe. Sophie took her seat, immediately reaching for her phone. "Work can wait," he suggested, pouring her wine. "When's the last time we had dinner together?" Guilt flickered across her face as she set the phone aside. "You're right. This looks wonderful, honey." They ate in what felt like practiced silence, broken only by the scrape of cutlery against plates. Ethan watched her over the rim of his wine glass, noting how she kept glancing at her phone, how her leg bounced slightly under the table, another nervous tell. "How's the Hanover account really going?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Must be intense if you're having so many late nights?" Sophie looked up, seeming distracted. "Oh yes. The client is very particular about their requirements. Liam," she paused just for a moment, but Ethan caught it. "The team is working overtime to meet their expectations." As if on cue, her phone lit up, screen facing upward after she'd shifted in her chair. Ethan caught the flash of a message notification, and in that split second, his world tilted on its axis. The words burned into his retinas, "Can't wait to put my hands on you again." Time seemed to freeze. The fork in Ethan's hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Blood rushed in his ears as the words repeated themselves in his mind, each repetition bringing a new wave of nausea. Sophie's hand darted out to grab the phone, but her reaction, the slight tremor in her fingers, the way her face drained of color, only confirmed what he'd seen. "Everything okay?" he managed to ask, amazed at how steady his voice sounded when everything inside him was screaming. "Just work stuff," Sophie mumbled, shoving the phone into her pocket. "You know how it is with deadlines and client demands?" Ethan forced himself to take another bite of chicken that now tasted like ash in his mouth. His mind raced through the past few months, each memory taking on new meaning. The late nights, the emotional distance, the constant phone checking. The pieces of the puzzle snapped into place with devastating clarity. "I should review some files for tomorrow," Sophie said, standing abruptly. Her plate was still half full, the food barely touched. "Thanks for dinner. It was delicious." Ethan watched her retreat to their home office, his appetite completely gone. The urge to follow her, to demand answers, to unleash the storm of emotions building inside him was almost overwhelming. But something held him back, a cold, calculating voice in his head urging patience. He needed to know everything before he acted. That night, lying in bed beside his wife, Ethan stared at the ceiling fan as it spun lazy circles above them. Sophie lay with her back to him, her breathing even but not quite deep enough for real sleep. The space between them felt infinite, though they were separated by only inches. That he thought about the woman he'd married 10 years ago, the way she looked at him across the altar, her eyes bright with tears of joy. The life they'd built together, the plans they'd made, all of it now tainted by whatever was happening with Liam Thompson. The next morning, Ethan Carter began his investigation in earnest. He left for work early, parking near Sophie's office building. He watched as she arrived, noting how she checked her appearance one last time before entering. 20 minutes later, a man he didn't recognize held the door for her, following close behind. Their body language spoke volumes, too familiar, too comfortable. Over the next few days, Ethan pieced together more of the puzzle. He noticed how Sophie always took her phone to the bathroom, never leaving it unattended. But she grew careless in her confidence, leaving small openings in her security. During one such moment while she showered, Ethan managed to access her phone. His hand shook slightly as he opened her email, grateful she hadn't thought to change that password. The evidence was there, in conversations between Sophie and Liam Thompson. Emails filled with innuendos and references to meetings that never appeared on her work calendar. A quick LinkedIn search revealed Liam's profile. Early 30s, carefully styled dark hair, the kind of professional headshot that belonged in a magazine. His profile listed him as a senior account manager at Sophie's firm, with recommendations praising his charismatic leadership and ability to connect with clients. Each new detail felt like another knife in Ethan's back, but he maintained his composure. At dinner, he'd ask about her day, listening as she wove stories about client meetings and project deadlines. He watched how she'd check her phone under the table, thinking he couldn't see her slight smile at whatever message appeared. The real confirmation came unexpectedly. Ethan had stopped for coffee near Sophie's office, legitimately in the area for a client meeting, when he overheard two women at the next table. "Did you see them at the holiday party?" the first woman whispered, not quite quietly enough. "The way Liam was following Sophie around like a puppy?" "He's always been a player," her companion replied with a knowing tone. "Remember Jessica from accounting? Same story, different year. Though I have to say he usually goes for the single ones." Ethan's hand tightened around his coffee cup, the cardboard creasing under his grip. He forced himself to remain seated, to keep his breathing even as the women continued their gossip. "Well, you know what they say about the quiet ones," the first woman continued. "She always seems so straight-laced, but I guess Liam has a way of bringing out people's wild side. Did you see them at Murphy's last week? I was there with Tom from IT and they were in the back booth, definitely not discussing the Hanover account, if you know what I mean." The women laughed, the sound grating against Ethan's nerves like sandpaper. He stood abruptly, leaving his half-finished coffee on the table. The cool air outside helped clear his head, but the women's words kept repeating in his mind. That evening, watching Sophie prepare for another late meeting, Ethan felt something fundamental shift inside him. The initial shock and pain had crystallized into something harder, colder. He observed her with new eyes as she applied fresh lipstick in the hallway mirror, smoothed her skirt with practiced hands. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder, the words so familiar they'd lost all meaning. "Lots to review for the Hanover account?" "Of course," Ethan replied, his voice carefully neutral. "Good luck with the review." The door closed behind her and Ethan walked to the window, watching as she pulled out of the driveway. He waited until her car disappeared around the corner before reaching for his keys. Tonight, he decided he would see exactly what kind of review she was conducting. Following her proved surprisingly easy. She drove to a small Italian restaurant on the other side of town, far from both their home and her office. Through the window, Ethan watched as she greeted Liam with a kiss that left no doubt about their relationship. They sat close, heads bent together, sharing a bottle of wine and laughing at private jokes. Ethan sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He memorized Liam's face, noted the way he touched Sophie's hand across the table, observed how comfortable they seemed together. This wasn't a first date or a casual fling. This was an established affair. The next week passed in a blur of surveillance and discovery. Ethan learned their patterns, the days they met, the excuses Sophie used. He watched as she transformed from his wife into someone else entirely, laughing, flirting, alive in a way she hadn't been with him in years. Each night, lying beside her in their bed, Ethan refined his plan. The fury inside him had cooled into something more dangerous, a calculated resolve that would ensure both Sophie and Liam understood the consequences of their actions. He thought about confronting them immediately, about exposing their affair to everyone. But he wasn't ready for that. Not yet, none of the options, exposing them immediately, simply walking away, satisfied the deep sense of betrayal that had taken root in Ethan's heart. One evening, as Sophie showered, Ethan stared at her phone on the kitchen counter. She had grown careless lately, confident in her ability to maintain her double life. A message notification lit up the screen. Another text from Liam, discussing their next meeting. Ethan picked up the phone, his decision made. He wouldn't confront her yet, wouldn't give her the chance to spin excuses or beg for forgiveness. Instead, he would wait, gather more evidence, and when the time came, ensure that both Sophie and her lover understood exactly what they had destroyed. The shower water continued to run upstairs as Ethan memorized Liam's number, his mind already forming a plan. He replaced the phone exactly as he'd found it, moving to the living room window. Outside, the street was quiet, peaceful, completely at odds with the storm building inside him. In their bedroom that night, Ethan listened to Sophie's breathing even out as she fell asleep. He thought about the years they'd shared, the trust they'd built, the future they'd planned. All of it seemed meaningless now, shattered by her betrayal. As he stared at the ceiling, his resolve hardened. He would make them pay, not with violence or loud confrontations, but with the cold, calculated precision that would leave them both understanding exactly what they'd lost. Tomorrow, he decided, he would begin the next phase of his plan. Let them think they were clever. Let them believe their secret was safe. Soon enough, they would learn the true cost of their actions. The study in Ethan's home office held the accumulated evidence of Sophie's betrayal. Photographs taken outside restaurants and hotels, screenshots of messages he'd managed to capture, notes detailing times and locations. Spread across his desk, they told a story of deception that had become impossible to ignore. Liam's phone number stared up at him from a post-it note, each digit representing another crack in his marriage. Ethan picked up Sophie's phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter again. She had grown so confident in her deception that she had become sloppy. The familiar twist of pain in his chest had hardened into something colder, more purposeful. Running his thumb across the screen, he opened her messages with Liam, studying their patterns of communication. Time to end this game, he muttered, beginning to type. Need to see you tonight. Ethan's working late on the Harrison project. Come to the house at 8. Don't want to wait for our usual spot. The response came almost immediately, making his jaw clench. Your place? What's gotten into you? Ethan forced himself to channel Sophie's writing style as he replied. Miss you too much. Door will be unlocked. Let yourself in. Want you in my bed for once. Babe, you're being naughty. I like this side of you. See you at 8. Can't wait to feel your hands on me. Each message felt like swallowing glass, but Ethan maintained his composure as he deleted the exchange. He replaced the phone exactly where he'd found it, checking the time. 2 p.m., 6 hours until Liam would walk into his trap. In his office, he made a call to Matt at work. Need you to do me a favor. What's up? Matt asked, the sound of blueprints rustling in the background. If anyone asks, I'm working late on the Harrison project tonight. Pause. Ethan, man, what's going on? You've been off lately. Just need an alibi for a few hours, Ethan replied, his voice steady. Can you handle that? Yeah, of course. Another pause. But if you need to talk. I don't, Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Just confirm I'm at the office if anyone asks. After hanging up, he spent the next few hours preparing. He moved furniture subtly, ensuring clear paths through the room. He checked the security cameras he'd installed the previous week, making sure they covered every angle. This wasn't just about confrontation, it was about having evidence if needed. At 6 p.m., Sophie came home from work. She moved through the kitchen with nervous energy, checking her phone every few minutes. Ethan watched her from the doorway, noting how she touched up her makeup before leaving the house again. I might go to the gym later, she said, not quite meeting his eyes as she poured a glass of water. The Harrison project needs attention, he replied evenly, watching her reaction. I'll probably be at the office until late. Don't wait up. Relief flickered across her face, poorly hidden. Okay. Good luck with the project. Under the table, her fingers flew across her phone screen. Ethan could picture the message to Liam. Coast is clear. Still on for tonight. His hands clenched briefly before he forced them to relax. Leftover chicken in the fridge if you want it, he said. Ethan maintained the facade of normalcy. Thanks, honey, he said. Sophie glanced up, guilt flashing across her features before being replaced by a practiced smile. Don't work too hard. At 7 p.m., Ethan made a show of gathering his work materials, his briefcase stuffed with blank papers. He kissed her cheek, noting how she tensed slightly at the contact. Don't work too hard at the gym, he said. I won't, she promised, already reaching for her phone as he walked away. Instead of driving to the office, Ethan parked his car a block away, hidden behind the hedges of a large house. At 7:45 p.m., he watched Sophie's car pull out of the driveway. She wasn't heading to the gym. He had followed her enough times to know she'd be driving to the small wine bar 3 blocks from Liam's apartment, their usual meeting spot before moving to his place. By 7:55 p.m., Ethan was back inside his house, positioned in the darkened living room. The small red lights of the security cameras blinked steadily, recording everything. He considered the many scenarios for this confrontation that he had imagined over the past weeks. Violence held a primal appeal, the satisfaction of making Liam hurt the way he had hurt. But that was too simple, too quick. This needed to be about consequences, about making them both understand exactly what they had destroyed. At exactly 8 p.m., the front door opened quietly. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, confident and unhurried, the sound of expensive shoes on hardwood. Italian leather, probably. Liam had expensive taste, based on Ethan's surveillance. The footsteps paused briefly by the stairs, then continued toward the living room. Ethan reached over and switched on the lamp. Liam froze in the doorway, one hand still raised toward his tie. He was younger in person, maybe early 30s, with the kind of looks that came from regular gym visits and expensive grooming routines. His confidence wavered as he registered Ethan's presence, reality crashing into whatever fantasy he'd been entertaining. You must be Liam, Ethan said, his voice dangerously calm. Please come in. We should talk about your relationship with my wife. There's been a misunderstanding, Liam started, taking a step back toward the hallway. His eyes darted between Ethan and the door, calculating distances. Ethan stood slowly, his height advantage becoming apparent. At 6 feet 2 inches, he towered over Liam's more compact frame. No misunderstanding. Sit down. Look, man. Sit down. Each word carried the weight of barely contained violence. Liam sank into the armchair, his cockiness evaporating. Listen, I don't want any trouble. This is clearly a sensitive situation. Sensitive? Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Trouble was walking into my home, thinking you'd be with my wife in my bed. Trouble was sending her messages about your dick while she sat across from me at dinner. What's happening now? This isn't trouble, Liam. This is consequences. She said you were having problems, Liam tried, his eyes continuing to dart toward the door. Said you were distant. That the marriage was basically over. And you believe that? Ethan moved closer, towering over him. Or did you just not care? How many married women have you pursued, Liam? The office gossip suggests I'm not the first husband you've disrespected. Liam's face paled. Who told you? Jessica from accounting? Or maybe others? Ethan's smile was sharp. Word gets around, doesn't it? The charming account manager who preys on vulnerable women. Tell me, do you have a system? Or do you just throw out lines until someone bites? This is crazy. Liam stood abruptly, fear finally overtaking his practiced charm. I'm leaving. Ethan's hand shot out, gripping Liam's shoulder with bruising force. Not yet. First, you're going to listen to exactly what kind of man you are. Get your hands off me. Liam tried to shake free, but Ethan's grip only tightened. I said listen. Ethan shoved him back into the chair. You walked into my house, into my life, thinking there would be no consequences. That stops now. Liam's attempt to stand again was met with a swift punch that sent him sprawling across the coffee table. Blood trickled from his split lip as he stared up at Ethan, fear replacing his earlier bravado. I've done my research, Ethan continued, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. 3 affairs with married women in the last 2 years. HR complaints that mysteriously disappeared. You're not just a homewrecker, Liam. You're a predator. You don't know anything, Liam spat, trying to regain some dignity as he pushed himself up. I know everything. Ethan pulled out his phone, showing screenshots of emails, text messages, and photos. Every meeting. Every hotel. Every lie. I could destroy you professionally. One email to HR about you and your married coworker. How many companies want a liability like that? What do you want? Liam's voice shook slightly, blood continuing to drip from his lip. I want you to understand exactly what you're part of. You're not her savior or her escape. You're just a convenient dick who doesn't care about destroying families. Ethan crouched down to Liam's level, his voice steady and dangerously calm. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to disappear from her life. No goodbyes, no explanations. Block her number. Avoid her at work. And if she tries to contact you, remember this moment. You're insane, Liam spat, wiping blood from his lip. Ethan's fist connected with Liam's jaw, sending him sprawling back to the floor. I'm perfectly sane, Ethan said, his tone icy. I'm just done playing nice. He hauled Liam up by his collar, the expensive fabric tearing slightly. Do we understand each other? Liam nodded frantically, blood staining his shirt. Yeah, I understand. It's over. I'll stay away. Good. Ethan released him, watching as Liam stumbled toward the door. And Liam, if I ever see you near my wife again, this conversation gets much less civilized. Liam fled, the door slamming behind him. Through the window, Ethan watched him sprint to his car, fumbling with his keys before peeling away from the curb. In the sudden silence, Ethan surveyed the room. A few drops of blood on the hardwood would need cleaning. The coffee table was slightly askew. He straightened everything methodically, erasing the physical evidence of the confrontation while the security cameras continued their silent recording. His phone buzzed. A text from Liam. I won't say anything about tonight. Just stay away from me. Ethan allowed himself a cold smile as he deleted the message. Phase 1 complete. Now for the harder conversation. At 9:15 p.m., headlights swept across the windows. Ethan sat in his armchair, a glass of whiskey in hand, watching as Sophie's key turned in the lock. She burst through the door, stopping short at the sight of him. Ethan, she said, her voice pitched high with surprise. I thought the Harrison Project. Sit down, Sophie. His voice was quiet but carried an edge that made her comply immediately. We need to talk about Liam. The color drained from her face. I don't. What are you? Don't insult me by lying, Ethan interrupted, his grip tightening around his glass. Not anymore. Ethan, please. I can explain everything. Explain what? He asked, his tone sharp. The late nights? The gym sessions that somehow left your hair perfectly styled? Or maybe, he said, pulling out his phone, the text messages about his dick while we ate dinner together? Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't, I never meant to get caught. That's the only thing you're sorry about, isn't it? That your perfect little affair got exposed? No, it's not like that. Sophie stood, reaching for him. I love you, Ethan. It was a mistake. He jerked away from her touch as if burned. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. Your coworker for months, that's a choice, Sophie. A series of choices you made every time you lied to my face. Please, she sobbed, mascara running down her cheeks. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. There's nothing to fix. Ethan stood, towering over her. Your lover just left here with a bloody lip and a new understanding of consequences. He won't be waiting for you anymore. Sophie's eyes widened. What did you do? What needed to be done? He walked to the stairs, pausing at the bottom. Pack your things. I want you out of my house tonight. Ethan, please. Where am I supposed to go? He turned back, his eyes cold. That's not my problem anymore. You chose this, Sophie. Now you get to live with it. I'll tell everyone what you did to Liam, she threatened, desperation making her voice sharp. I'll go to the police. Ethan laughed, the sound devoid of warmth. Go ahead. Tell them how your married lover came to my house to meet my wife. I'm sure that'll go over well at work. I have everything recorded, Sophie. Everything. She crumpled onto the couch, sobs racking her body. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. No, you're not, he said quietly. You're sorry you got caught. Sorry your comfortable life is falling apart. But you're not sorry for what you did. Pack your bags, Sophie. When I come back down, I want you gone. The stairs creaked softly under Ethan's feet as he ascended. The house felt different, emptier but somehow cleaner, like lancing a wound. The pain was sharp but necessary for healing. On the coffee table, Sophie had left her key and a note. Ethan picked up the key and dropped it into his pocket without reading her words. Whatever explanation or justification she'd written wouldn't change anything. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophie. Please don't do this. We could talk about this. I'll do anything. Another message, I love you. Granted, nothing. Please just talk to me. And another, where am I supposed to go? All my life is here. Ethan blocked her number without responding, then poured himself another whiskey. In the silence of the house, he felt the first stirrings of something like peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the satisfaction of having dealt with a threat decisively. Tomorrow he would call his lawyer. Tonight, he would sit with his whiskey and the knowledge that he'd handed out the consequences they had earned. Let them both understand exactly what they had thrown away. Looking around the living room at the space that had witnessed their confrontation, Ethan felt a strange sense of completion. The security cameras continued their silent vigil, recording the empty room where his marriage had finally ended. But unlike the marriage, this ending had been on his terms. His phone buzzed one final time, a text from an unknown number. Liam again, using a different phone. You've made your point. I'm done with all of this. She's your problem now. Ethan smiled grimly as he blocked this number too. No, he thought. She's her own problem now. The morning after the confrontation dawned cold and gray, matching Ethan's mood as he sat at his kitchen counter. Steam rose from his untouched coffee while he stared at a business card. Richard Palmer, divorce attorney. He had kept it in his wallet for weeks, waiting for this moment. His phone showed a cascade of notifications. 15 missed calls from Sophie's now-blocked number, 3 from unknown numbers, and a string of increasingly desperate text messages. He picked up his phone, scanning the messages without emotion. Please talk to me. I can explain everything. Where am I supposed to go? You can't just throw away 10 years. A new message popped up from an unknown number. My fiancé left me because of you. Thanks for ruining my life. Was Liam. Ethan smiled coldly as he composed a response. You ruined your own life. Be grateful that's all you lost. Then he blocked that number too. At 9:47 a.m. the doorbell rang. Ethan checked the security camera feed on his phone, watching Sophie pace on the porch. She looked terrible, makeup streaked from crying, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Her usually perfect hair was a disheveled mess. Ethan, her voice carried through the door. Please, I know you're in there. We need to talk about this like adults. He remained silent, watching through the camera as she pressed her forehead against the door. I have nowhere else to go, she continued, her voice cracking. Liam won't answer my calls. My credit cards aren't working. I tried to get a hotel room, but because they're joint accounts. Ethan called through the door, his voice steady, already following his lawyer's recommendations. You can't do this to me, she said, anger creeping into her tone. I helped build this life too. Everything we have. Everything we had, he corrected, still not opening the door. At least let me in so we can talk properly, she pleaded, banging on the door now. This is still my house too. Ethan opened the door so suddenly that she stumbled back. Actually, it's not. My name's on the deed. I bought it before we married. But you didn't read the prenup that carefully, did you? Sophie looked even worse up close. Mascara smeared under red-rimmed eyes, her expensive suit wrinkled from sleeping in her car. The designer purse she clutched probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but it wouldn't help her now. Can I just come in? She asked, her voice softening. She took on the pleading tone she always used when she wanted something. Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. No, Ethan said, blocking the doorway with his body. But I'll give you 5 minutes right here. Consider it more generous than you deserve. I made a horrible mistake, she started, wringing her hands. Liam, it didn't mean anything. It was stupid and selfish, and I know that now. But 10 years of marriage. 10 years of what? Ethan's voice remained calm, which seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. 10 years of me working to build a life while you built a relationship with your coworker? It wasn't like that, she insisted. Things between us had gotten distant. Liam was just, he made me feel. Don't. The word cut through her excuses like a knife. I don't care why you did it. I don't care what he made you feel. I care that you did it. You looked me in the eye every day and lied, Ethan said, his tone steady but cold. We can fix this, Sophie pleaded, desperation sharpening her voice. People overcome affairs all the time, with counseling, with work. Want to know what I find interesting? Ethan leaned against the doorframe, studying her with a detached calm. You're more upset about losing your comfortable life than about losing me? That's not true. Tears spilled down Sophie's cheeks again. I love you. No, you don't, he said, his voice steady and unyielding. You loved what I provided, the house, the lifestyle, the stability. Tell me something, Sophie. How long would it have gone on if I hadn't caught you? She flinched, her silence speaking volumes. 6 months, he answered for her. I have every receipt, every hotel bill, every restaurant charge. Did you think I wouldn't notice the joint account being drained for your little rendezvous? You were watching me? Color rose in her cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and anger. How dare you spy on me? How dare I? Ethan laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. You're standing on my porch begging to come back into my house after I caught you arranging to meet your lover in my bed. And you're angry about invasion of privacy? People make mistakes, she said, stepping closer, trying to catch his eye. Haven't you ever made a mistake? A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. His eyes met hers, cold and unforgiving. Your coworker for 6 months, that's a choice. Multiple choices, made every single time you met him. What about counseling? She tried, her voice softening. We could work through this. Learn to trust again. Build something stronger. There is no need anymore, Ethan said, pulling an envelope from his back pocket. These are divorce papers. My lawyer will contact yours. I don't have a lawyer. Fresh tears fell down her face. I don't have anything. You've frozen all our accounts? Joint accounts, he corrected. Your personal account is still active. He paused, a cold smile forming on his lips. Oh wait. That's right. You spent most of that on hotels and lingerie for Liam, didn't you? Her hand flew up to slap him, but Ethan caught her wrist easily, his grip firm but not painful. Don't. He held her wrist until she lowered her hand. You lost the right to touch me the moment you let him touch you. What am I supposed to do? She whispered, her shoulders slumping. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Ethan released her wrist. You're a college-educated professional, Sophie. Figure it out. My parents already know, he continued, his tone cutting. I called them last night. Told them everything. Your mother cried. Your father asked if the prenup was still valid. He seemed relieved when I said yes. Fresh horror dawned on her face. You didn't? I did. Just like I sent emails to HR documenting Liam's pattern of pursuing married co-workers. And to his fiancée. Oh, did you not know about her in Boston? Sophie staggered back, her voice barely a whisper. He's engaged? 3 years. Long-distance relationship. She was very interested in the photos I sent. Especially the ones from the Rivera Hotel. That little weekend getaway last month when you told me you were at a marketing conference. You've ruined everything. Sophie's voice rose to a shriek. No, you did that. Ethan held out the envelope again. Take the papers. Read them. Sign them. The faster you do, the faster this ends. She snatched the envelope from his hand. I could fight this. Get my own lawyer. With what money? Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his expression unyielding. The prenup is clear about infidelity. You get what you brought in, minus joint assets acquired during marriage. Considering your shopping habits, that's not much. I helped you build your career. Her voice rose with anger. All those client dinners, networking events. And while I was building our future, you were destroying our present. He checked his watch. 5 minutes are up. Go find a lawyer, Sophie. Next time we talk, it'll be through them. Wait. She grabbed the door as he started to close it. What about my things? My clothes? Your clothes are in garbage bags in the garage, he said flatly, along with all the lingerie receipts I found. Interesting how your taste in underwear improved when you had someone else to show it to. You're being cruel, she whispered. No, Ethan replied. I'm being honest. Something you might want to try. He gently but firmly removed her hand from the door. The garage will be open until noon. After that, anything left goes to Goodwill. I have nothing, she said, tears starting again. You have exactly what you chose, Ethan said, closing the door and engaging the lock with a decisive click. Through the security feed, he watched her stand there for long minutes, staring at the envelope in her hands. Finally, she walked to her car, a leased luxury vehicle he'd already arranged to have repossessed tomorrow. Another text buzzed through, this time from Liam. My entire life is falling apart because of you. Ethan typed back coldly, Should have thought about that before you fell into my wife. Then he blocked that number too. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Sophie tried twice more to see Ethan. Once, she showed up at his office, causing a scene that would fuel office gossip for months. "You can't just throw me away," she'd screamed as security let her out. 10 years. Don't I deserve a second chance? His co-workers avoided eye contact, though he could hear the whispers. Let them talk. Ethan had nothing to be ashamed of. At the next meeting in his lawyer's office, Sophie's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in designer suits that probably cost more than Sophie could afford now, tried to argue against the prenuptial agreement. "My client contributed significantly to the marriage," she argued across the conference table. "The house value has doubled. The investment portfolio? Your client violated the fidelity clause," Ethan's lawyer countered, sliding across copies of hotel receipts and photos. Section 3, paragraph 2, is quite clear about the consequences. "These photos were obtained without consent," Sophie's lawyer pressed. "In public places," Ethan cut in. "No expectation of privacy in a hotel lobby or restaurant. And the credit card statements are all admissible." The negotiation lasted exactly 20 minutes. In the end, Sophie got her personal belongings, her car loan transferred to her name, and a small settlement that would barely cover 3 months' rent in a modest apartment. A month after she signed the papers, news filtered through the office grapevine. Liam had left the company, moving back to Boston to try salvaging his engagement. It hadn't worked. The last update said he was working at a smaller firm, his career trajectory significantly altered. Sophie, too, had changed jobs, taking a lower-paying position at a smaller company across town. She tried reaching out through mutual friends, sending messages about regret, growth, and learning from mistakes. Ethan blocked each new number and deleted each message unread. "She seems really sorry," his sister Sarah said over coffee one morning. "Maybe." "Don't," Ethan said, his tone ending the conversation before it started. 6 weeks after the divorce was final, Sophie made one last attempt. Ethan found her sitting on his porch steps one evening, looking thinner and older than he remembered. "Just hear me out," she pleaded as he approached. "5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "I already gave you those," he said, moving to step around her. "I lost everything," she said quietly. "My job, my friends, my home. Liam, he never cared about me at all, did he? Just moved on to the next willing woman." "You didn't lose anything," Ethan said, turning to face her. "You threw it away. There's a difference." "Can't we at least talk?" she said, wiping her eyes. "All these years together mean nothing?" Ethan unlocked his door. "The woman I married never existed. She was just a role you played until something more exciting came along." "That's not true." She grabbed his arm. "I loved you." "You have a funny way of showing it," he said, removing her hand. "Go home, Sophie. Whatever's left of it." "I have an apartment share with 2 roommates," she said bitterly. "My portion of the rent is more than I can afford on my new salary." "Is that what you wanted to hear?" "I don't want to hear anything from you." He stepped inside. "That's the point you keep missing. You've punished me enough," her voice rose. "I get it, okay? I screwed up. I lost everything. Isn't that enough?" Ethan paused in the doorway. "It's not about punishment, Sophie. It's about consequences. You made choices, adult choices. Now you're living with adult consequences. So that's it? 10 years mean nothing?" "They meant everything," Ethan said, meeting her eyes one last time. "That's why there's no coming back from this. Goodbye, Sophie." The door closed with finality. Through the window, he watched her stand there, shoulders shaking with sobs, before finally walking away into the gathering darkness. Inside, Ethan poured himself a whiskey and sat in his favorite chair. The house felt different now, no longer a monument to betrayal, but not quite a home either. Not yet. But it would be, in time. His phone buzzed with a text from Matt. "Drinks tonight? You've been hibernating too long." Ethan considered the invitation. Maybe it was time to step back into the world. Not to date. He wasn't ready for that and might not be for a long time, but a drink with a friend? That could be a start. "Give me 30 minutes," he texted back, setting down his glass. Ethan looked around the room where his marriage had ended. The security cameras were gone now, their memory cards stored safely with his lawyer. The furniture had been rearranged, erasing the last traces of that night's confrontation. He'd lost something too, he realized, Not just a wife or a marriage, but a certain faith in people. A capacity for trust that might never fully return. But he'd gained something as well, a clearer understanding of his own strength. His unwillingness to accept betrayal. His ability to stand firm when everything around him crumbled. Before leaving, he took one last look at his phone. There was a new message from an unknown number, Sophie's latest attempt to reach him. Without reading it, he deleted the message and blocked the number. The action felt less like anger now and more like closing a book. The story was over. Time to start a new one. Grabbing his keys, Ethan headed out to meet Matt. Behind him, the house stood quiet and empty, its rooms slowly transforming from a space of shared memories to something new, a foundation for whatever came next. He didn't know what that would be yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He would never let anyone make him question his worth again.